Oh, wow. I haven't even started yet. You don't have to applaud yet. Thank you, Kristen. That was awesome. I've loved getting to hear these testimonies. You hear enough from us up here on Sunday mornings. It's good to hear from some other people every now and then. But throughout this series, throughout this initiative, we've been talking about building a new church. And this whole time, I can't help but think of another church that is being built. I'm talking about the Sagrada Familia, which if you've ever been to Barcelona, maybe you have seen the Sagrada Familia. And it's this famous basilica that is still being built 143 years after beginning construction in 1882. And I think about all the people involved in this project. I think about the architect Antonin Gaudi right here. I think about the sculptors, the builders, the city planners, the church leaders, the donors, all these people, these thousands of people who invested their time, their talents, and their money to build something that they would never see completed. In 1926, Gaudi died when the building was only 1/5 of the way completed. And yet even then they continued to build. 10 years later, the Spanish Civil War interrupted construction. And yet when the war was over, they continued to build. You see, Europeans, they build churches not just with their generation in mind, they're building churches with centuries of generations in mind. And from what I've seen of our project, it does seem like we'll come in under the 143-year mark, thankfully. But you better believe we are building this church with future generations in mind. Today's topic, if you brought your booklet with you, we're talking about making room for what's next. And if you asked Gaudi and the Catholic Church back in 1882 what was next for that beautiful basilica in Barcelona, I don't think they could have really told you all that much. Nobody saw 2 world wars, a civil war, and a dictatorship on the horizon. They didn't know all that was gonna happen in the history of their country for the past century and a half. They didn't know the future of their church. All they knew was that they were building a church for the future. Now, my mission today, the goal I set for myself was to come up here and tell you about the future of Messiah. But truth be told, I'm terrible at predicting what happens next. God did not see fit to make me a prophet. No, I'm more like that TikTok pastor that predicted the rapture back in September. You remember that time, right? My predictions tend to be wrong. And so I don't really know what's gonna happen next, usually because God ends up surprising me. And so what I see is that we've got kind of this blank page. This blank page is titled The Future of Messiah. This blank page just waiting to be filled in. But let's be real, it's not exactly a blank page, because in this future and in this new building, there's still gonna be so many good things that we're already doing. There's still gonna be worship. There's still gonna be baptisms. There's still gonna be kids ministry and youth ministry, community groups, Night to Shine. All these awesome and good things that we are still doing, we're gonna keep doing. And yet there is that blank section there at the bottom, isn't there? And that blank section excites me, because that blank section represents opportunity. The opportunity to reach people and groups that we are not already reaching. The opportunity to do things that aren't already there on the page. And like the builders of great cathedrals, we are not just building for what we're already doing. We are building to make space for a future that we don't even know about yet. We are building to be a blessing for people that we have not even met yet. Which makes it kind of strange what we've been doing here during this series. Giving money to bless people, to bless generations that we will never meet and who will never pay us back. Committing ourselves to a future that isn't clear yet. 4 years ago, Jessica and I got married, and Pastor Chuck did the ceremony. And it was that part of the ceremony where the pastor spends a bunch of time talking and you wish he'd hurry up and get over with it already. I believe they call that part the sermon. But I was paying attention to the sermon that day. I was listening. Pastor Chuck told the story of Ruth. And if you don't know Ruth's story, it happens during the period of time known as the Judges. This is just after the Israelites came home to the promised land. They just started living there. But the context for Ruth's story actually happens all the way back during the Exodus and the wandering in the desert. At that time, God gives his law to his people, his commandments, his instructions for how they're supposed to live. And there's this interesting law that God gives back then that we don't talk about all that often. But it's this practice that has to do with something called gleaning. You find it here in Leviticus 23. It says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I am the Lord your God. This to me is an interesting law because we're familiar with things like tithing and offerings, but those are things that belong to God, right? Well, here's a law where God comes along and says, hey, when you harvest, set aside part of it, not for yourself and your own savings, nor even for me. Set aside something instead for the poor and the foreigner. Set aside stuff that you worked for people who you've never met, and by the way, will probably never pay you back. A few hundred years after the time of Leviticus, that's when we meet a young Moabite widow named Ruth, a foreign widow. And she's in a tough spot because she's got to take care of not only herself after the death of her husband, but she's got to take care of her Israelite mother-in-law, a woman named Naomi. So that's where we're at in this story. We've got a foreign widow named Ruth and an Israelite mother-in-law named Naomi. Here's their story. Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So he is an Israelite, one of God's people. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you, they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, who does that young woman belong to? The overseer replied, she is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I've told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground, and she asked him, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? Here in the story of Ruth, we see Boaz living out that commandment from Leviticus 23, that commandment to commit part of your harvest, part of your wealth to bless the poor, the foreigner, the stranger who can't pay you back. And what is so important to recognize here is that Boaz doesn't commit to this kind of generosity after meeting Ruth. He doesn't show generosity to her after vetting her and making sure everything's all set up and straight. No. Boaz was faithful and generous to the poor and the foreigner before ever meeting this woman. before ever vetting the people who would receive his generosity. He had committed a portion of his land for people he did not know, a part of his wealth for people to bless people that he knew nothing about and who would never pay him back. And Ruth just happened to be one of those strangers that Boaz blessed through his commitment and generosity. And wouldn't you know, she ended up becoming his wife. That's where the wedding sermon comes in. You never know what God's gonna do through your good work. And you see, that's how commitment and generosity work. We commit to doing the good thing and the right thing before we know the future, before we are given a guaranteed outcome. We are generous when we give away to strangers without expecting something in return. That is how commitment and generosity work. We don't know the future. We might not even know the people we're giving to, but we give to them anyways out of faithfulness to God and what he's called us to do. 2 weeks ago, many of you here made a commitment to the future of this church. You made a commitment to make space, not just for the good things that we are already doing, but also to make space for good things that we don't even know about yet, things that aren't even on that list yet, people that aren't even in this room yet. And it's because of your commitment that we can start dreaming about what those blank spaces are gonna look like. What kind of people will those blank spaces represent? Who will God send to our church? What groups, communities, ethnicities will God fill that space with in 5 years, 10 years, 100 years? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. I'm excited to see what God is gonna do even before we even know what he's gonna do. And so for those of you who gave, I want you to understand something. That you gave to support a church that is for you and for your family. But it is not just for you. When we build churches, we build them for people who aren't here yet. We build them for people who did not or could not give what you gave. People who won't pay you back. That's who we're building for. And I've been thinking about one of Jesus's very first sermons. We find it in Luke chapter 4. Jesus goes to his hometown to preach one day. And here's how the story goes. He went to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day, he went to the synagogue as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Who is the good news of Jesus for? Well, it's for everybody, right? It's for you who gave a commitment card to give financially towards Raise the Roof. But specifically here, Jesus says the good news is for the poor, the prisoner, the blind, and the oppressed. If you'll notice, those aren't the kinds of people you typically bankroll large building projects with. And maybe you feel like those aren't the kinds of people you interact with all that much. This church, if it is built, will be built for people who did not give what you gave. It will be built for people who you do not know and who could never pay you back. And that's because the gospel of Jesus Christ is for people who could not give what you gave. Jesus is for the widow who is just scraping by, barely able to make ends meet. He is for the sick who are drowning in medical bills and are wondering how they're gonna put food on their table. He is for the people who lost their food stamps earlier this month and who, thank God, you are blessing out there right now through your food donations. Thank God for what you brought this morning to bless them. Thank you. You see, the church and the gospel we preach is for those who did not and could not give, and those who will never pay us back. Quick show of hands, how many of you here gave towards the campaign that built those commons over here back in the 2000s? Were any of you here for that? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, like a decent handful of you. We'll say maybe a dozen, 2 dozen of you. How many of you were here to give money towards the building of this church-nasium that we are in back in the 1990s? How many of you here were here for that? 1, 2, 3, oh, that's awesome. Pastor Chuck, were you even here for that back then? Not even Chuck was here. Man. Just look how many of you are benefiting today from the generosity of people you've never met. And I'm guessing who you've never paid back. Now think of how many people will be here 20 years from now benefiting from the generosity of people they've never met. People who will never pay you back. Benefiting from something that they gave nothing to. That's what the gospel is, isn't it? You and I benefiting from work that we did not do. You and I benefiting from the work of Jesus because you and I were too poor, too broken, too sinful, too blind, too oppressed to do that work ourselves. And so Jesus came in and did that work for us. He did for you and me what we could not do ourselves. He came to save and restore those who did not earn it, and those who could never pay him back. So hear me. For those of you who did not or could not give what you wanted to give to this initiative, for those of you that don't have a nice testimony like the ones you've heard here the past few weeks, those of you for whom just showing up on Sunday morning is a victory, for those of you who are oppressed and hurt, imprisoned, those of you looking for comfort in the house of God, even though you have nothing to give, this church is for you too, because Jesus Christ is for you. There's that blank space on that page titled The Future of Messiah. And it's a space that we are praying to fill this next chapter. And I pray we fill it with people that we see in Luke chapter 4. We're making space for those who have not given to this church. We're making space for those who don't know Jesus yet. It is space for your neighbor, your classmate, your friend, your coworker. It is space for strangers you do not know, future generations that you won't meet, people who have never been here before. It is space for you who have been oppressed and hurt by this world and are just looking for a place to belong in the family of God. Because God came in the flesh and made space in his very home for those same people. He came for the poor, the captive, and the sinner. So for those of you who did not give towards Raise the Roof, I wonder, what is your generosity and your commitment going to lead to? Who will be in these seats because of what you gave? Here I want to go back to the story of Ruth and Boaz. You see in their story, right, Boaz, because of his generosity, he finds a wife. And because of their commitment to each other, they make a family. But that's all that they knew. They just knew that they loved each other. And so they got married. And because they got married, they said, let's start a family. And that's all that it was, just a small goal. Two people who loved each other, bringing a family into this world. But then you get to the book of Matthew. And here's what you read. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. One man's generosity and one couple's commitment played a role in bringing the salvation of the world. And I believe that your commitment and your generosity will bring the same salvation here to the people of St. Charles. This church will be for people who are not here yet. It is for people who will never pay you back. It's for people who haven't earned their place. It's for people who just need to know that God has come to restore all that is broken in them and in this world. That sounds like a church that's for you and for me.